Hello guys, today I'm going to be showing you the basics of Paint Tool Sai. I will admit I don't know everything about the program, but I do know most of the things about the program, so if you've never used this program before, you should be able to learn a lot about it. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is just creating a new drawing, so you just go to File, New. You can set the name, the height, the width, and you can use a preset to determine, like just preset heights and widths if you want. I don't usually use this preset because most of my drawings don't fall under one of these presets, so I just customize whatever preset I want. So you can just do it like that. And you can also set pixels per inch if you're going to print out your drawings. So that's that. The next thing I want to talk about is obviously the file. There's everything like save, save as, open, all that normal stuff. But the next thing I'm going to talk about is the layers, because a lot of people don't necessarily start with programs that have layering. So layers are pretty self-explanatory. If you draw on the lower layer, literally lower on the thing, you can see it goes behind the stuff on the upper layer. So it's pretty simple in that sense, but there's also a lot of other things in this layer menu. So the first thing is, obviously, this creates a new layer, this empty page. This creates a line work layer, which you can use for line work. This creates a layer set, which when you click it, it's literally a folder in the program. So you can set multiple layers in the set, and it's all linked together. So you can make it disappear, reappear, close, open, you know. The next couple icons are transfer down, which what it does is, if it's hard to see on this mini thing, let me draw a big circle so you can actually see what happens. So you can see it's green on there. If you hit the transfer down layer, it just transfers the data down. But the difference between the transfer down layer and this one, merge down layer, is that they actually merges the two layers together, which you can see right here. They're actually permanently merged. This button right here clears the layer, which is different than deleting layer for obvious reasons. Clearing layer just erases everything on the layer. Delete layer deletes layer. Simple enough. So now there's opacity. Opacity is how see-through the layer is. 100% opacity means it's opaque. You can't see through it at all. If you have, if you right-click and assume the color, or just bring the color over, you'll see it's the same. It doesn't change at all. But if you change the opacity, say to about 50%, it mixes the background with the original color, which in this case is white, and you know how opacity works. And you can see through it like that. So this can be used for a lot of things, like glows, or like if it's foggy, you can use that to add shading, all sorts of stuff. Mode. Now, these, I think, are similar to the ones in Photoshop. Photoshop is obviously more comprehensive in this. But you can just play around with these to check the different modes that there are. I haven't used these much, and I don't really know what they do, but they're there to use. Okay, so now I'm going to go to this panel, the second panel over. So this panel, it has, I'm going to start at the top. So these are all the brushes that you can use. Note that you can scroll down and there are more, and there are way more spaces than there are brushes, because there is a way to download new brushes. I don't know how to do that, but you can actually download more than just the default brushes that are on the thing. So let's just start. You can just play around the brushes. The ones that I do want to talk about, because I use a lot, are Legacy Pen, Airbrush, and Normal Brush. Legacy Pen is essentially, it 100% fill. It's a circle that it draws, so it's 100% opaque, no blur whatsoever. Airbrush is very blurry, as you can expect. And brush kind of it tries to simulate an actual brush, so you can see it's like fuzzy and stuff. But there's a whole bunch of different scale things here. So like blending, it changes how the brush works. It's used in almost every single one. Each one has a unique things in it. So like this one is blending, dilution, persistence. They all have unique things in it, and many of them have this too. So simple circle, spread and noise, all these things change how the brushes work. So this is the airbrush, despite it being extremely dense. But if you go back to simple circle, it's like that. You can change all sorts of things. The density will change. The density is in almost every single one of them. The density will change how dense the brush goes. So it is essentially like the opacity for the individual brush. So you don't have to have it at 50% opacity to draw a see-through line. You can just change the density of the brush. Then there's obviously eraser, which you can also change the density for as well, so you don't have to get 100% erase every single time. Bucket. Now the bucket. For when I used Microsoft Paint, the bucket was very exact about how it created things. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So I draw this circle, and I use the bucket, and it fills in the color, right? Well, this one is different, because when you fill in the color, it blurs the line. It's only slight, but it does blur the line, and if you keep on doing it, I have the color difference very low right now. Oh, I put it to maximum. If you keep on doing it, it will slowly get thinner and thinner and thinner. So if you have really thin lines, it may break the lines over time. And also the color difference, like I said. So here, you can see that this is over here white and this is yellow. So you can play with the color difference to get different areas that it does. So I'm clicking here, it does almost the whole area. If I do it again, this will be a larger area because the color difference is much higher. And also you can do it based on transparency, based on a bunch of different things. So you're going to need to switch this around a lot, because especially if you're working with a color palette that has very similar colors, you will need to have lower color difference selection than one with extremely different colors, where you can use much higher color difference selection. So it's kind of interesting how to use the bucket tool. And this also, just a hint, you can use this to actually make pretty perfect circles without any extra tools, because you can utilize, you can draw with the airbrush like I did, and then click, and it'll create an almost perfect circle. But there are other ones that I want to talk about, specifically these three. So this is not a pen or anything, it's just a selection, and you can just select things and move it around. But mainly this one. This one is like a mix between the selection tool and the bucket. So it has the color difference, transparency stuff, but you can select based on colors and transparency. And this is another way of creating like perfect circles when also using with the airbrush tool. So it's useful like that. Transforming a drawing. So transforming is simple. You can just click this. You can also click the other ones to do like just rotation or just free deform. But I usually just use transform because it includes all of these. So if you click transform, you can just change the shape, height, whatever you want for the drawing. If you press shift and click on the corner and pull, it keeps its dimensions. If you click control and you click either the side or the corner, you can actually change the perspective of it, instead of just like having it square all the time. you can change the perspective of it. Now, one thing is that you have to be in the square selection rather than the lasso selection in order to transform, but that does not mean you can't do a lasso selection and then go to the square tool and click transform. You can do the same thing just like that. You don't have to select with the square tool. As long as there's a selected area, you can just click over to the square tool and transform like that. So that's something. And then there are these buttons, flip horizontally, flip vertically. They're pretty self-explanatory. So the next thing I want to talk about is these 6 things. So this is a hue, saturation, values tool. These two are essentially the same thing. So this one and this one are essentially the same, just presented in different ways. So it's just choosing the hue on the circle or the hue on the bar, and then the value and saturation you can choose on the square or on these bars. And that's one way of selecting color. And then there's also the RGB selection, so you can choose how much red, how much green, how much blue is in the thing. But the RGB does not have this sort of system in it, only the hue, saturation, value. So what I usually do is have both of these open because it allows me to really accurately pick color. So the color mixer I have never used and really don't know how to use, so I'm sorry, but I can't really explain how that works. But let's just go on to the next one. So this is swatches. You can use it to select colors that you're going to be using for a palette for either a character or a background or whatever you're drawing. So in order to set a color, you just right click and you set it. To delete a color, you right click and remove it. It's really simple, and you can select a lot of colors and put them in there. So what's next? You can also, all of these have different things that you can do with them. So like, let's go to filter. So I'm going to draw something random. It doesn't really matter because it's going to be changed by the filter. So I'm going to draw, why not leave it like that? I'm going to draw this thing. I don't think I mentioned it, but right-clicking is selecting a color, and what was the other thing that I noticed? Oh yes, the different tools, I forget if I said it. Oh, they're these, right. There's also blur that I need to talk about. So it's pretty self-explanatory. It just kind of blurs the thing. I have it at extremely low density right now. It also has its own sliders. My screen proportions are weird, so sometimes there will be more sliders if I close some of these. It's just with this screen. I have a different screen over on the right that's bigger and actually can see everything. So you may need to open and close some of these in order to be able to see all the things you can do with the brushes. It's kind of stupid, but it is what it is. So you can use blur like that, and there's a bunch of different sliders that you can use for that as well. So anyway, back to filter. I'm sorry about that. You can use it to change things. So when you do a filter, one sec. When you do a filter, it's only based on the layer that you're selected on. So like I'm gonna put another little, I already used that color, another little drawing on this lower layer. If I'm on layer 2 instead of layer 3, changing anything about the filters will not change anything about the lower layers. Similarly, if you have a portion selected and use the filters, it'll only be the selected portion that's changed. So for the filters, you can use these. This one's hue, self-explanatory, saturation, self-explanatory, although these are extremely saturated colors, so that's why you're not seeing anything. So like if you're going to use dimmer colors, and use the, not brightness and contrast, let's go back to the original. Do the saturation, then you'll see a change. Why is it not? Then you'll see a change. Hue and saturation. There we go. Then you'll see a change. And luminescence is, it's like going through the value, essentially. So there's that, and then you can also do the brightness and contrast. And brightness and contrast are pretty self-explanatory what they do. Brightness is how light it is, how dark it is. Contrast is what, it's essentially kind of the same sliders, but color deepen will try and make the colors as far away as it possibly can. So here, let me do this. I'm gonna have a dimmer color, airbrush. I'm gonna go over here. Let's just make a really bad looking drawing. Okay, now I'm gonna color deepen it. So it'll try and make the colors as vibrant as possible. All the other side, it just turns it gray. But it'll try to make the colors as vibrant as possible. And it can have some pretty interesting effects. So that's useful for that. Also for selection. So say I wanted to, like I had a really complex thing, and in order to select this one tiny part, I'd have to select a whole bunch of stuff. So wait, let me find an example that I can use for this. So I'm just going through my folders to find a good drawing. Here. Here. So say I wanted to just select the clock. I could either go through, use the wand tool, go in and select each individual color and do it like that. Or I could select this and the shadow, because it's actually a better thing to do would to increase the color difference. But I could select this, hit this button which inverts the selection, and I have that selected. Just like if I just wanted to draw like that, I could just have that selected like that. Or you can also erase, like a lot of times I will be using this tool and then you just click away to deselect. But if you drag even a little bit, it'll create a small little portion that's still selected, and I'll be trying to draw and don't know that it's still selected. So if you just want to get rid of all selections, this is the tool to use. Lastly, there are undo and redo buttons up here, but you can also use Control Z and other things like Control Z, Control C will copy, paste, blah, blah, blah. Although when copying and pasting, it will create a new layer. I don't know if there's a way to change this, but when copying and pasting, it will create a new layer up here. So just be aware of that. And I think that's pretty much everything. Oh, last thing is you can increment the layer by going into selection and clicking this. And it just makes it 1 pixel bigger. So you can just keep on doing this over and over again to get bigger and bigger layers, or however you want to manipulate this. So that's also a useful tool too. So I think that's pretty much everything about this that I can talk about. I'm sorry if I missed anything. I hope this was informational. See ya.